Seat 2A belongs to a real first-class passenger, not you. Get your things and move before I call security." The black man in 2A did not move. He looked up slowly, and the flight attendant's smile curdled the moment his eyes met hers. "I'm sorry. What did you just call me?" She leaned in close enough that only the front rows could hear. "You heard me. Now get up before I make this ugly." Behind her, a heavy-set white man in a wrinkled blazer let out a short, satisfied laugh and folded his arms like he was watching a show he'd already paid for. Nobody in that cabin knew yet that in less than 2 hours, this airline would lose $4 billion in market value because of what was about to happen in this exact row. 5:40 in the morning, River Oaks, Houston. The city outside was still the color of a bruise, purple sliding into gray. Marcus Kane stood barefoot on cold marble, watching his espresso machine finish its cycle, one slow drop at a time. He'd been awake since 4. He was always awake by 4. Old habit from a childhood where the lights came on before the sun did, because his mother left for her shift at the hospital laundry at 4:45, and somebody had to be up to lock the door behind her. His phone lit up on the counter. Daniel Cross, his chief operating officer, 12 years at his side, the only person alive who called him Marcus instead of Mr. Cain. "You're supposed to be asleep," Daniel said when he picked up. "I'm flying to New York this morning. Liberty Coast, 6:50 flight out of Bush Intercontinental. The Whitcomb Group wants to talk about the credit line again." Daniel's voice sharpened. "Liberty Coast. Marcus. We're holding $4 billion in that stock right now. You saw the numbers from their earnings call. I saw them. I'll call you when I land." He ended the call and looked at the newspaper spread across the kitchen island. Liberty Coast Airlines sat in the business section. Third consecutive quarter of declining customer satisfaction scores, a lawsuit from a wheelchair passenger left on a tarmac in Denver, whispers of a boardroom split over the CEO's spending. He folded, the paper closed. He'd read enough biz sections in his life to know what a company sounds like right before it breaks something it can't fix with a press release. He dressed the way he always dressed to fly commercial. Charcoal suit, no tie, no watch, no cufflinks, a single leather carry-on by the door. Anonymity had always been a kind of armor forever since the first time a hostess in Dallas looked at his handmade suit and still asked him to wait by the door while she seated 4 white families who walked in after him. The terminal at 6 that morning was a river of rolling suitcases and half-closed eyes. Marcus moved through priority screening with the ease of a man who had done this 10,000 times. The TSA officer, a young man with a name tag that read Diaz, gave him the small professional nod that officers give people who clearly know which line to stand in. Marcus nodded back. At the gate, the agent scanned his boarding pass, paused, glanced up at the platinum stripe across the top of the card, then back at his face. Then back at the card again, the way people do when a detail doesn't match the picture they built in their head before you walked up. She handed it back without a smile. He'd seen that look 10,000 times, too. He didn't react. He bought a black coffee from the kiosk near gate C14, tipped the barista $5 on a $6 cup, and walked toward the jet bridge. Flight 619 to JFK smelled like recycled air and orange disinfectant. First-class cabin lights glowed amber. A flight attendant stood at the cabin door, checking boarding passes. A woman in her 40s with a kind of tight, practiced smile that decides who you are before you say a single word. Her name tag read Denise Colton. She took Marcus's boarding pass. She looked at it. She turned it over, though there was nothing on the back. She looked past him down the jet bridge, like she was checking for someone else who might actually belong to that seat. 2A, she said finally, flat, no greeting at all. He took his pass back and walked down the narrow aisle. He settled into 2A, put his bag in the overhead bin himself, pulled out his laptop, and slid on his headphones without turning any music on. Just building a wall, the way he always did. He scanned the cabin the way he always scanned rooms, quick and unremarkable. Row 1, seat B. A woman in her 50s in a gray blazer, headphones already in, eyes locked on a tablet, the posture of someone who flies for a living and has stopped noticing anything that isn't turbulence. 2C and 2D, a young couple in matching workout gear, both scrolling their phones, both checked out of the world around them. Row 3, seat A, a man in his late 30s with a paperback novel open on his knee. His name was Sean Tobias, off-duty NYPD, flying home to Brooklyn after visiting his sister in Houston. He looked up when Marcus sat down. He looked up again, longer this time. When Denise Colton spent an extra 10 seconds staring at Marcus's boarding pass, like it might change if she looked hard enough. Sean knew that look. 6 months earlier, he'd watched his brother-in-law, an engineer in a pressed navy blazer, get turned away from a downtown steakhouse with a confirmed reservation, while 3 other tables that walked in after him got seated without a word. Sean had been standing at the bar. He hadn't pulled out his phone that night. He'd told himself it wasn't his fight to film. He'd thought about that choice more times than he could count since. This time, he slid his phone out of his jacket pocket. He opened the camera. He didn't press record yet, but his thumb hovered right over the button, just in case. Row 4, seat B, an older man in a faded Army veteran cap, already asleep before the cabin door had even closed. Liberty Coast Airlines was 7 weeks into the worst public relations stretch of its 40-year history. A viral video of ground crew throwing wheelchairs like luggage. 2 vice presidents gone. An earnings call on Thursday that analysts were already calling a bloodbath in advance. The cabin door was still open. Boarding was still crawling along. And that's when a voice rolled in from the jet bridge, loud, already annoyed with the entire world. "Where's my seat? I don't have all day for this." Denise Colton's whole face brightened, like a light had been switched on behind it. She turned toward row 2. A heavy-set man in a wrinkled blazer came rolling down the aisle like he'd bought the plane along with the ticket. An oversized gold watch flashed on his wrist with every step. A cloud of cologne strong enough to wake the veteran in row 4 followed 3 seconds behind him. His name, though nobody in that cabin knew it yet, was Roland Vance Whitmore, and he did not bother greeting anyone at the door. He just kept walking. He stopped at row 2. He looked down at Marcus, his upper lip curled like he'd found something rotten under his shoe. "There's somebody sitting in my seat." He said it loud enough for the whole cabin to hear, on purpose. "Let me handle it, sir," Denise said, stepping past him, planting one hand on the back of seat 2B. "Sir," she said to Marcus, her voice suddenly public, suddenly numb, performing for an audience. "We have a small reassignment to make." Marcus pulled one side of his headphones off. "I'm sorry, what?" "You'll need to gather your things. Mr. Whitmore is one of our Diamond Elite VIPs, a real first-class passenger, and we need the seat for him." Marcus set his laptop down slowly. "I'm Diamond Elite too. This is the seat I paid for." "Are you, though?" Her head tilted. It wasn't a question. It was a blade dressed up as a question. Behind her, Roland let out that laugh again, low and ugly. "Some of us actually pay full fare, pal." The woman in 1B turned her head half an inch. She didn't look at Marcus. She looked at Denise, held it there a beat, then turned back to her tablet without a word. The couple in 2C and 2D went completely still. The kind of stillness that comes from people deciding very hard not to be involved. Sean, 3 rows back, pressed the red circle on his phone screen. The camera was rolling now. "What's your name?" Marcus asked her. "Voice level, and your employee number, please." "My name doesn't matter, sir. What matters is you need to gather your things and move to 22F. 22F was a middle seat 3/4 of the way to the tail, wedged between a man with a neck pillow and a woman already asleep against the window. A 6-hour layover in Charlotte had somehow been tacked onto the new itinerary, as if to make a point. My ticket says 2A. I bought this seat 3 months ago. I'll need to see your identification again. You scanned it 90 seconds ago at the door. I need to see it again, sir. Marcus reached into his breast pocket and handed her his license without another word, the way a man does when he already knows every eye in the cabin has turned toward him. She studied the photo. She studied his face. She studied the photo again, slower this time, dragging it out. Marcus Kane, she read aloud, tasting the name like something sour. And how exactly did you pay for this ticket, Mr. Cain? I beg your pardon? Cash? Credit? Was this an employer booking? We've had a lot of trouble lately with people trying to sneak into first class on discount fares. I just need to verify. That's not something you verify by interrogating a passenger. Was this a corporate account? Sometimes companies book the wrong tier by mistake. Happens all the time. It was my personal account. And what line of work are you in, Mr. Cain? I don't have to answer that, and you already know it. Roland barked out another laugh from the aisle. Just answer her. Pal, some of us have a flight to catch. Marcus turned his head, slow, and looked at him for the first time directly. You have my reservation in your system. Pull it up, sir, Denise said, her voice climbing. That public rejection voice again. I'm going to ask you one more time to cooperate, or I will have to call the captain. Marcus took out his phone and opened the camera. Sir, you cannot record airline personnel. Yes, I can. FAA case law is very clear on that. Her smile died completely. She turned on her heel and disappeared toward the galley. Captain Gerald Marsh appeared 90 seconds later. Silver hair under a flat-brimmed cap, the tired eyes of a man with 30 years in the sky, and a pension he did not want to jeopardize this close to retirement. Denise reached him first, talking fast, low, urgent. He's been a hostile captain. He's recording the crew. He's refusing reassignment. I need him off this aircraft. Marsh's eyes moved from Marcus to Roland, standing with his arms crossed in the aisle, to the woman in 1B, who was very carefully not looking up from her tablet. Sir, he said to Marcus, in the trained, weary tone of a man who had done exactly this twice already this month. I'll need you to step into the galley with me so we can sort this out. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. He looked at the line of boarding passengers, still watching through the open cabin door. He looked at the small, hidden triumph on Denise Colton's face. Then he stood. The whole cabin went quiet in that particular way. A room goes quiet when everyone senses something is about to be remembered for a long time. Marcus reached up, lifted his own bag from the overhead bin, refusing to let anyone else touch it, and stepped into the aisle. Roland did not move out of the way. He waited until Marcus was close enough, then stepped forward instead of aside. Their shoulders collided. Roland did not apologize. People like you always make a scene, he muttered, just loud enough for the front rows to catch. Marcus stopped, turned. His voice, when it came, was very quiet. What people exactly? Roland smirked and said nothing, which was its own answer. Denise snatched the boarding pass from Marcus's hand and held it up high, theatrical, so the whole cabin could see it. This passenger has been removed. In row 4, a young boy in a Houston Astros cap tugged at his mother's sleeve. Mommy, why are they making that man leave? His mother pulled him close and whispered something into his hair instead of answering. The boy kept staring down the aisle at Marcus the entire way. Sean Tobias caught all of it on camera, low and steady, held like something precious. The boarding pass held up like a trophy. Roland's smirk. The boy's question. The mother who had no answer for it. Marcus walked down the aisle without looking back. Captain Marsh walked behind him. The cabin door closed. Roland dropped into 2A and stretched his legs into the footwell that had been Marcus's a minute earlier. A young flight attendant appeared at his row, 23 years old, 4 months on the job. Name tag, reading Chloe Bennett. Champagne, sir? Chloe asked. Pour me one, sweetheart, Roland said, tapping the rim of his empty glass against the tray. And you know, the whole cabin smells a lot better now. Chloe's smile froze in place. Nobody had trained her for this. She'd trained for turbulence and evacuations and medical emergencies, not for this particular kind of silence expected of her. In the galley, behind the curtain, Marcus set his bag down. Denise stood framed in the open cabin door, watching Roland raise his second glass, and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had absolutely no idea what she had just done. Captain Marsh escorted Marcus down the jet bridge into fluorescent light. 2 TSA officers stood waiting at the far end, hands folded, faces carefully blank. A man in a navy Liberty Coast blazer stood with them, name tag reading Frank Dabrowski, 6 years, as ground supervisor, a file full of prior complaints from passengers of color that had all been closed with the same 3 words. Review concluded, no action. He didn't look at Marcus, he looked at Denise. Hostile passenger refused reassignment. Recording the crew, Denise said. Captain wants him off. Dabrowski nodded once and turned to Marcus. Sir, I need you to step off the bridge with me.
For what reason? Security clearance.
I cleared security 90 minutes ago. We're doing it again. Open the bag. Marcus set his carry-on down and unzipped it without protest, without pulling his hands back when Dabrowski reached inside. Dabrowski pulled out the laptop and held it up to the light like it was evidence of something. This is an unusual amount of equipment for a passenger like you. It's a laptop, Marcus said. They sell them at the airport, and the phone. Unlock it. No, sir. I'll ask you what probable cause you're operating under. Dabrowski didn't answer, because there wasn't one. He turned and led Marcus toward a windowless door tucked into the side of the jet bridge. The kind of door a person walks past 1,000 times without ever registering that it exists. Inside was 10 feet by 12, bare drywall, a folding metal chair, and a camera mounted in the corner with a red light that was not blinking. Dabrowski made Marcus stand there in silence for 3 full minutes before he spoke again. People who run when they're innocent don't usually ask if they're being detained. I haven't run anywhere. You walked me in here. Just an observation, sir. Denise appeared in the doorway a moment later. He was aggressive, I have witnesses. The younger TSA officer behind her, name tag Diaz, winced, just a flicker, gone as fast as it came. He had watched the entire boarding process. He had seen exactly what happened. He said nothing. Mr. Cain, Dabrowski finally said, we've rebooked you on a partner carrier. Departure in 4 hours. Middle seat, connection through Charlotte. We can have your bag delivered. Am I being detained? What? Am I being detained, or am I free to go? Sir, this is a security matter. Am I being detained? A long silence. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Dabrowski glanced at the 2 officers behind him. Diaz would not meet his eyes. You're free to go. Then I'm leaving. Marcus picked up his bag and walked past all 3 of them without another word. As he reached the door, he stopped and turned back just long enough to say, Your camera in the corner. The light isn't on. That's a problem for you, not me. Then he walked out. Up in the cabin, Flight 619 was still on the ground, engines beginning to spool. Roland had already moved on to a different junior attendant, a young woman named Sierra Nash. You ever model, sweetheart? You've got the cheekbones for it. Sierra's smile was made of glass. In 1B, the businesswoman had stopped pretending to read her tablet. She was watching Roland directly now, and she did not look away. Marcus walked out through the jet bridge into the empty terminal.
Sen.
Flight 619 was already pulling back from the gate. He sat down on a metal bench facing the tarmac, laced his fingers together in his lap, and watched his own reflection in the glass. A calm face, glasses slightly crooked from where Roland's shoulder had clipped him. An elderly woman in a wheelchair rolled past, her aide pushing her toward the next gate. She turned her head and looked at him. Really looked. The way one person recognizes another without needing a single word exchanged. She nodded back. The wheelchair rolled on. He looked down at his own right hand. It was shaking, just a small tremor, the kind nobody would notice unless they were looking closely. He pressed his palm flat against his thigh and breathed slow in, slower out, 90 minutes of pressed down anger, finally allowed to sit somewhere instead of being carried. He took out his phone. His thumb found Daniel Cross's name. "Cameron, you should be in the air. I'm at the gate. They pulled me off the plane." A pause on the other end, just long enough to mean something. Daniel didn't ask why. "What do you need?" "What's our current position in Liberty Coast?" $4.1 billion. "Why?" "Liquidate all of it." "Full execution. Finish before the closing bell. File the disclosure the same day." "I want this done before the market has any idea what's coming." "Marcus, are you safe?" The first sound out of Marcus's mouth in 2 hours that wasn't perfectly measured. A short, dry breath, almost a laugh. "I'm fine, Daniel. Just do it, now." Done. 1,200 miles north, on the 41st floor of Liberty Coast Airlines headquarters in Dallas, a junior analyst named Trevor Boyle stared at his terminal and went very, very still. "Mr. Vance," he said, not taking his eyes from the screen. "Sir, you need to see this." Peter Vance, the airline's chief financial officer, walked over with a coffee cup in hand. His cup stopped halfway to his mouth. "That's Cain Meridian Capital." "Yes, sir, they're selling." "How much?" "All of it. $4.1 billion." The coffee cup hit the carpet. Vance didn't notice. He was watching the live ticker on the right edge of the screen. Already sliding, already bleeding red. "Get me Langford." At the gate in Houston, Marcus Kane was already standing, bag in hand, walking toward the Sky Club lounge. The departure board above the empty gate updated to read Flight 619. Departed. In Dallas, the trading floor had gone silent around a single number. The stock had been falling for 90 seconds, had down 9% and still dropping. Arthur Langford, chairman of Liberty Coast Airlines for 9 years, walked into the executive suite, still buttoning his shirt cuff. "What?" he said. Vance pointed at the screen. Cain Meridian just filed a disclosure. They dumped their entire position, $4 billion. "We're down 18% and climbing." Cain Langford repeated the name slowly. "Pull up his account." Marcus Kane's profile filled the screen. Langford read it out loud to a room of the airline's 12 highest-paid executives. Founder and chief executive, Cain Meridian Capital, $38 billion under management. Our third largest institutional shareholder, Diamond Elite Plus designation, permanent, signed in 2019. The room went dead silent. "One of our flight attendants," Langford said finally, "threw our actual largest individual shareholder out of first class this morning to make room for a man whose only qualification was being somebody's cousin on this board." A vice president near the window closed his eyes. "Get the company jet ready." Now, 90 minutes later, in the Sky Club lounge at Bush Intercontinental, Marcus was on his second black coffee. 41 missed calls, sitting untouched on his phone, notifications turned off after the 10th urgent email. 3 men in suits came through the glass doors at a near jog and stopped at his table. "Mr. Cain," the silver-haired man said, voice hoarse. "I'm Arthur Langford, chairman of Liberty Coast. I flew in from Dallas the moment I heard. May we sit?" Marcus looked at him for a long moment, then gestured to the empty chairs. Langford sat, along with Vance and a third man he introduced as Richard Colby, head of investor relations. Langford opened a leather folder with trembling hands. Inside was a blank signed check, an offer letter for a board advisory seat, and a written commitment to terminate every employee involved. "Mr. Cain, I am begging you. Reverse the sell order. We will do anything." Marcus took a slow sip of his coffee and set it down. Each word that followed, landed like a stone dropped into still water. Mr. Langford, this morning, when I was sitting in seat 2A, I was not a billionaire. I was not your third largest shareholder. I was a black man holding a boarding pass, and that is exactly how your employee treated a black man holding a boarding pass. You are not here because they mistreated me. You are here because they mistreated the man who happened to be able to move $4 billion before lunch. Those are not the same thing, and I think you already know it. Langford's eyes were wet. He rose, walked around the table, and placed one hand on Marcus's shoulder, the gesture of a man who had run out of language. Marcus looked at the hand, then he looked up. "Mr. Langford, sit down." Langford sat. "I will not reverse the order. It completed 9 minutes before you walked through those doors. Your stock price is not my problem anymore. It is the consequence of your company's culture." He slid the folder back across the table. "I don't want your check. I don't want a board seat. I don't need anyone fired to make me feel better. The courts will decide that part. And the apology you actually owe me, you cannot pay it because it isn't mine to collect. A real apology would have looked like training Denise Colton differently 14 years ago. It would have looked like listening the first time a passenger of color filed a complaint about her, instead of the 11th. You cannot go back and do that now. So don't apologize to me. Apologize to them." Langford didn't move for a long moment. Vance finally touched his shoulder. "Arthur, let's go." They stood. Langford lingered. "Mr. Cain." Marcus was already typing on his phone. He did not look up again. When the glass doors closed behind them, he allowed himself exactly one slow breath with his eyes closed. His hand was still shaking under the table. Nobody saw it. By that evening, Sean Tobias's video had a name online. People were calling it the Houston tape. A Houston Chronicle reporter named Miriam Castillo received it from a contact inside the police union and watched it twice before calling her editor. The headline went live before dinner. "Black billionaire removed from first class, airline stock collapses within the hour." Within 90 minutes, the story had a second, crueler hashtag, chasing the first one across the country, a direct mockery of Denise Colton's own words from that morning. By noon the next day, Denise Colton stepped off her return flight into a welcome she had not expected. 2 HR officers and a corporate attorney were waiting on the jet bridge. They did not smile. "Miss Colton, you're suspended without pay, effective immediately. Surrender your badge." Her hands shook as she unclipped 14 years of service from her blouse. By the end of the day, the suspension had become a termination. Frank Dabrowski was placed on leave that same afternoon and unemployed within the week. Richard Colby resigned before the sun set. 2 members of the Liberty Coast Board, including Roland Whitmore's cousin, resigned within hours of each other, using suspiciously similar language in their letters. Captain Marsh gave a careful, lawyered statement admitting that the purser had misrepresented the situation to him. He never used the word discrimination. His attorney wouldn't let him. Everyone watching understood exactly what he meant anyway. Chloe Bennett gave Liberty Coast HR a full, unprompted account of everything Roland had said to her on that flight. She was offered a promotion, protection, and a confidential settlement. She accepted the first 2 and refused the third. She wanted her account on the record, not buried. 12 hours later, Denise Colton stood in the lobby of Cain Meridian's headquarters with no appointment and no makeup, her eyes swollen in the particular way that comes from crying alone in a parked car for an hour. The receptionist had already been given instructions. "Ma'am, Mr. Cain is not available. Please, just 5 minutes." "Ma'am, he's not available." Marcus watched her on the lobby security feed from his office upstairs. He did not move from his chair. She left a handwritten letter at the front desk. 3 pages. The bottom one warped where tears had fallen on the ink. When it reached his desk, he read it once, then again, and set it flat between his coffee and his keyboard. He called his general counsel, Patricia Moore. She wrote to me, 3 pages. Says she has 2 kids, says her marriage is ending. Says she's going to lose the house. She's asking me to be, and I'm quoting her exactly, a better man than she was that morning. A silence. She doesn't mention the 11 passengers who came before me, Patricia said. Not one line. She isn't sorry for what she did, Marcus said. She's sorry it happened to the wrong person. File the letter with the court. We continue. Roland Whitmore did not write any letter. He called Marcus's office 9 times over 3 days. Voicemails ranging from indignant to desperate. And on the 4th day, he showed up in person, shouting in the lobby that this was all a misunderstanding, that he didn't have a racist bone in his body, that his wife had a black co-worker she got along with just fine. Security walked him out. He resisted. A pedestrian filmed the whole thing on the sidewalk, and the clip was everywhere within a day, captioned simply, "The VIP wants his apology." Marcus issued one public statement, 79 words, and gave no interviews. It ended the news cycle within 3 days on its own weight. The action I took with my firm's holdings was a fiduciary decision, based on the company's demonstrated culture, and not a personal grievance. Other matters will proceed through the appropriate legal process. He didn't need to say more. The video was already doing the talking. 6 weeks passed. The Department of Transportation opened a formal civil rights investigation into Liberty Coast Airlines. Federal aviation regulators took a particular interest in a windowless room off gate C-14 and in a camera whose red light had never once been on. Marcus's civil suit named Liberty Coast Airlines, Denise Colton, Frank Dobrowski, and Roland Vance Whitmore. He asked for $30 million in damages. His lawyers had urged him to ask for far more. He told them no. He had a specific number in mind, and a specific place he intended to send every dollar of it. Discovery uncovered something worse than anyone on either side had expected. Denise Colton had 11 prior internal complaints filed against her over 6 years, every single one from a passenger of color. Every single one closed by Frank Dobrowski with the same 3 words. Review concluded, no action. But that was not the headline. The headline was a text message 20 minutes before boarding that morning. Denise had sent a message from her personal phone to Roland's personal phone. Got you a welcome. Subpoenaed financial records explained why. 3 months earlier, Roland had personally handed her a $2,000 prepaid card in a parking garage. He had done it twice before that. Every flight he booked on her route ended the same way, an upgraded seat that had belonged to somebody else an hour earlier. This was not an unconscious bias. This was a bribery scheme, running for years, and 11 passengers of color had not been reseated for operational reasons. They had been sold. The federal hearing was held in Houston before Judge Elena Marsh, no relation to the captain. Marcus took the stand for nearly an hour and answered every question the same way he'd spoken to Langford in the Sky Club, level, factual, never once raising his voice. The full, unedited video from Sean Tobias's phone played in open court, including the boy in the Astros cap asking his mother why they were making that man leave. 3 different news anchors would later say on air that it was the exact moment they had to stop and compose themselves during the broadcast. Denise Colton's defense collapsed the moment her own text message filled the courtroom screen. Her attorney requested a recess. The judge granted 10 minutes. When the room reconvened, Denise changed her plea. Chloe Bennett took the stand the following day, wearing the same modest suit she'd worn to her Liberty Coast job interview 4 months earlier. She did not cry. She read from a single page, named every comment Roland had made to her, folded the page in half when she was done, and returned it to her purse. A woman named Mrs. Ibarra testified that same afternoon. She had been bumped from seat 4A to a middle seat on a Liberty Coast flight 19 months earlier, and discovery now confirmed exactly why. It had cleared the way for a Roland Whitmore upgrade. She was 68 years old. She had filed a complaint at the time. Frank Dabrowski had closed it within the hour. She told the court she had not flown Liberty Coast since, and that she had also stopped trusting that anyone in a uniform would believe her if she spoke up again. The jury did not need a recess after her testimony either. Arthur Langford took the stand on the third day. He had resigned from the chairmanship a week earlier, his attorneys calling it removing personal liability exposure. Everyone in the room understood the real reason. He testified for over an hour and took personal responsibility for the culture of his own company. When the plaintiff's attorney asked whether Liberty Coast had a written anti-discrimination policy, his answer ran in every newspaper the next morning. On paper, yes. In practice, no. We had a policy. We did not have a culture. That failure was mine. Then he turned toward the gallery and found Marcus sitting in the plaintiff's row and spoke to him directly. "Mr. Cain, I apologized to you in that lounge, and you were right to refuse it. I'm not apologizing to you today. Today I'm apologizing to the 11 passengers Denise Colton mistreated before you ever boarded that plane. I failed them long before I failed you. I have no excuse to offer any of you." The courtroom went completely silent. Marcus nodded once. That was the whole of his answer. There was no embrace, no staged forgiveness for the cameras. Langford understood and sat back down. The verdicts came down over the following weeks. Liberty Coast Airlines settled Marcus's civil suit for $30 million. He donated every dollar of it through a press release shorter than the statement that had ended the whole scandal. The recipient was a newly formed legal aid network for airline passengers of color. The airline's remaining board members resigned within the month. The stock lost another 15% that quarter. Denise Colton was permanently banned from the airline industry by federal order. The Department of Justice indicted her for wire fraud tied to the bribery scheme. At her sentencing hearing, she was given a chance to speak before the judge handed down her term. Nobody in that courtroom expected what she said. "I keep telling myself it started small," she said, voice shaking. "Not performing anymore. Nothing left to perform for. A better seat here, a favor there. I told myself I was just being efficient, just keep being a good customer happy. I never once let myself think about who I was moving out of that seat to make room for him. 11 times I didn't think about it. The 12th time is the only reason anyone is looking at the other 11 at all, and that is the most shameful sentence I have ever had to say out loud. I was not unlucky. I was not caught in a misunderstanding. I decided over and over, for years, that some passengers mattered less than others, and I got paid to keep deciding it. I don't know how to undo that. I don't think I get to undo that. I just know I finally see it, and I am asking every one of those 11 people, if any of you are listening, I am sorry. Not because I got caught, because I was wrong." She received 18 months in federal prison, 3 years of probation following her release, and a public restitution order to be paid to the legal aid network Marcus had founded. Frank Dabrowski was fired and barred from any supervisory airline role for a decade, following a separate civil rights finding tied to his pattern of dismissing complaints without review. Roland Vance Whitmore was convicted of federal bribery. He received 22 months in federal prison. His real estate firm filed for restructuring within the year, and his name became something no company wanted attached to a masthead ever again. In a single brief statement issued through his attorney before sentencing, he offered the only words anyone ever heard him say that resembled an apology. "I spent 30 years thinking money made me better than people. I have had a lot of time in a small room to understand how wrong that math was. It came out clumsy and late, and it changed nothing about his sentence. But it was, for the first time in the entire case, something that sounded true. The story ran on national television. Miriam Castillo won a regional journalism award for her coverage. Sean Tobias was profiled under a headline that simply read, "He pressed record." Marcus gave exactly one interview, 5 says long, filmed in his Houston office with no lighting rig and no makeup. His hands folded on a plain wooden desk. "I had leverage," he said. "I used it. Most people don't have $4 billion to move before lunch. That's the actual problem here, not the solution." He looked directly into the camera. The next person this happens to won't be a billionaire in seat 2A. It'll be a teacher, or a nurse, or somebody's grandmother. And they won't have a fund to liquidate. They'll only have a voice and a phone. We have to build a world where that's enough on its own. 6 months later, the legal aid network Marcus funded had opened 3 offices in Houston, Detroit, and Atlanta. The first one was named the Tobias Center, after the off-duty officer who had pressed record instead of looking away. Sean accepted the honor in person and brought his sister and her husband with him. The same engineer who'd once been turned away from a steakhouse with a confirmed reservation while nobody said a word. On a Thursday morning in early spring, Marcus Kane walked back through the same terminal in Houston. Different airline this time, a different crew, the cabin smelling like fresh coffee instead of orange disinfectant. The gate agent scanned his pass without a second glance at the platinum stripe.
"Good morning, Mr. Cain. Welcome aboard."
That was the entire interaction. He walked down the jet bridge, turned into the cabin, and sat down in seat 2A. He put his own bag in the overhead bin. He pulled out his laptop and slid on his headphones. Across the aisle in 2B, a young woman in her early 30s was settling into her own seat, laptop bag at her feet. The particular kind of poise those people build after learning to walk into rooms that were never built expecting them. She glanced over. She knew exactly who he was. She gave him a small nod. He nodded back. That was the whole exchange, and it was enough. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engines climbed. The nose lifted off the runway into a sky that had gone fully gold with morning. Somewhere over Louisiana, a flight attendant named Rosa came down the aisle with the coffee cart. "Coffee, Mr. Cain?" "Yes, please." Black. She poured it and moved on. No pause, no second look at his boarding pass, no studying his face for a reason to doubt him. That, in the end, was the whole point. Nothing happened. And for the first time in longer than he could easily remember, nothing happening felt like the biggest victory of all. If you had been the woman in seat 1B that morning, phone within reach, the whole thing unfolding 4 feet from your face, would you have pressed record? Would you have said something out loud? Or would you have looked back down at your screen and told yourself it wasn't your fight? That question matters more than the ending of this story, because Marcus Kane had $4 billion of leverage sitting in his pocket that morning, and almost nobody else on Earth has that. Most people only have a voice and a phone and the choice to use both when it counts. History has shown over and over that this has always been enough, as long as somebody is willing to use it.